The April 23rd meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Chairwoman Boyce,
I'm here.
Mr. Esposito, Mr. Howland, Ms. Cayley, Mr. McCann.
Is there anyone here signed up to speak at the public forum?
There is not.
Seeing none, call the public forum closed. I'd like to approve the minutes for the March 26th, 2012 meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee. So if they'll stand approved unless notified by the end of the day. Thank you. New business.
The first referral is 12-0140, a local law to prohibit cyberbullying in Monroe County.
Moved by Mr. Howland. Second by Mr. McCann. Any discussion? I'd like to recognize the maker of the motion, Mr. Gamina. Would you like to speak to the referral? Thank you.
This law to prohibit cyberbullying is something that has, I think, coalesced over the last year and a half. And as an educator and as someone who sees the danger and also the effects of cyberbullying among our young people in and around Monroe County, it was something that, yes, we could possibly wait for the state to do something around this and to perhaps pass a law on cyberbullying. There was one that was proposed but has gotten stuck and actually died in committee. And I think it was, instead of waiting, similar to what we did with texting while driving 3 years ago, and also something similar to what we did with protesting at funerals a year and a half ago. This was something that its time was now. And when you look at the statistics behind cyberbullying, there was a study that was done over the last year and a half by the iSafe Foundation, and over half of the adolescents and teens reported being bullied online. 1 in 3 young people have experienced cyber threats online. And over a quarter of adolescents and teens have been bullied repeatedly through their cell phones or the internet. And only 1 in 10 will actually tell a parent. And only 1 in 5 will actually report anything to the law enforcement. As an educator, one of the things that is very frustrating at times is the fact that when a student comes in and reports that they're being bullied, if it's a typical bullying incident where it involves either verbal harassment or physical harassment and it's on school grounds or during school hours within a building, that's relatively easy to deal with and to handle. But when a student comes in and they report that they're being harassed either through Facebook or Twitter or by being texted either inappropriate phrases or pictures, and it's happening outside of school, and it's happening at home, it's very hard for a school or an administrative team or a team of teachers to help that child or those parents. This is one way to not only heighten awareness around cyberbullying, but it also gives the victim, as well as their family, and as well as the schools, the school districts, another avenue to work with law enforcement so that law enforcement can actually make a visit to the perpetrator's home or to visit that perpetrator and say, you know what you're doing is actually, it's against the law. It is a form of targeted harassment. And it's a way, hopefully, to bring some of these cases to a close. So when you look at this law again, its time has certainly come. There are a few states that have proposed and actually passed cyberbullying laws, including Delaware, Indiana, Kentucky, and Maine. Those 4 states, however, really there's no real teeth to those laws. It's really about, you know what, it's up to the school districts to come up with a policy. And our goal was to go beyond a policy and actually give victims, their families, law enforcement, and school districts a way to combat this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gamina. Mr. Barker, would you like to speak as a co-author?
Just really quickly, I'm a middle school teacher and have been for over 20 years. And, of course, middle school is kind of ground zero for bullying. And one of the things we learn as professionals when we first get into the field is that you have to be accessible for the students. You have to be out there to prevent bullying, be it in the halls, the locker rooms, whatever. With the new technology, that's just not possible. What is happening, of course, is the bullying leaves school grounds, as Mr. Gamina said, and it follows the kids home. It used to be you could say, well, you don't want the kids to have cell phones, but that just isn't the case anymore. When cell phones first became available, you had very few sixth graders having them, and that just isn't the case anymore. The overwhelming majority of sixth graders have cell phones, and with that comes the social media. And telling the kids, telling the parents, well, just don't let them have Facebook accounts or Twitter. It isn't feasible. It isn't logical. A lot of the times, the parents don't know that they have them anyway. So it's out there. Bullying now can follow the students home. It can follow them through vacations, and we need to be able to do something about that. And a lot of law enforcement officials would like to have an avenue, have something like this, as Mr. Gamina said, that would help them to be able to go to the door and help put a stop to this.
Mr. Gamina, you'd like to speak again? Sure.
One last point. As we were researching this law in terms of what our phrases were going to be and how we were going to structure this referral, we did look at 3 counties in New York that have a similar law against cyberbullying: Rensselaer, Albany, and Suffolk, who all passed laws in 2010. And we were able to use language that those 3 counties had used, and also look to see have those laws been challenged constitutionally in the last 2 years. And none of them have. We did have our law department review this referral. The county law department does have former assistant district attorneys as well as public defenders, and so both sides looked at the language within this law, and again, I think they actually improved the language from Rensselaer, Albany, and Suffolk. But again, we felt very confident that over the last 2 years, because that language used in those 3 counties seemed to work for them, that it was definitely a good template for us to start with. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Howland?
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Legislator Gamina and Legislator Barker on bringing this referral before us. It's something that is definitely needed. I have personally, through my family, experienced cyberbullying twice in the last 6 months, and the breakdown is just as they described it. When the school is trying to cooperate with the police and the cyberbullying takes place off of school grounds, it's just impossible to get any type of cooperation. So I'm going to be strongly supporting this referral and hope everyone else does.
Any other discussion on the matter? Mr. Esposito.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to echo Legislator Howland's comments, congratulating the sponsors for bringing forward this proposal and this issue. This is a very serious problem that's probably getting far worse in our community than we even are aware of. And so for the simple fact that we're discussing the issue and taking steps to try to reduce it and mitigate it, I think is a good thing. It may, in fact, be the best thing that comes out of this discussion and ultimately potentially this law, and that is greater public awareness of the dangers of cyberbullying. I think the thing we should delve into at this committee meeting is the manner in which it's proposed to do that. One, to make sure that there aren't any constitutional issues regarding free speech and other things that obviously we hold very dear and should be thought of and considered during something like this, as well as just that there aren't any other unintended consequences as we consider something like this. So I guess I do have a few questions. I guess I'll start generally through you, Madam Chair, to either of the sponsors. And that is, you're both educators, you're both involved in a school environment, and I'm curious to get your opinion as to why you think something like this, fines and potential punishments, potential misdemeanors, would be any more of a deterrent, or if that's what you think it's going to be, to cyberbullying than other punishments or other prevention or other education efforts that I think should, if not are already happening in school environments or in other environments in our community. Why go a route where we start talking about prosecution?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Legislator Esposito, Vince, you bring up a great point, and that is, the enforcement piece or the penalty piece, and the law itself certainly doesn't substitute for the parents, and we're not trying to usurp the roles of a bully's parents in terms of how they try to bring up their child or what their consequences would be at home. But the other piece would be, for most behaviors that raise a significant public safety concern, such as, I'll go back to texting while driving. Does the penalty does it serve as a deterrent? I guess you could argue either way, but the penalty itself may certainly bring a raised awareness and a raised level of consciousness by the bully and maybe their families when a police officer shows up at their door to say, you do face a $1,000 fine, or, if the person is an adult or above the age of 17 or 18, and maybe there's some jail time too. But I think sometimes it's a way to get a person's attention and to raise that awareness so that perhaps they can modify that behavior.
Thank you. And I certainly would agree that's a terrific intent. I think we should all, in our community, regardless of our position, try to raise that awareness. And I figured that was the case, and I understand, attaching penalties to behavior that can be, criminal or otherwise. One of the things you described in your justification was that you're limited in an educational setting to taking behavior that happens off the school grounds into account when instituting disciplinary action against someone, for example, say bullying. And I guess I'd like to understand that a little bit more, because it's my understanding that's not exactly true. I mean, if someone does something to another student, and they are a student, that there are I think, a long list of educational case law and state law, education laws that allow you to institute discipline or punishment on a student for harming another student, regardless of where it happens. And so I guess I'd like to understand a little bit more about why there is that gap in the educational setting, which I would think is the most appropriate way to address any student's behavior, given that they are going to be there and they're going to have many opportunities to learn about why something like this behavior would be bad. So if you could just expand through the chair to the sponsors on what it is that's lacking about that outside of the school environment scenario.
Through the chair, I'll talk a little bit about just, I guess, from my experience as a building level and a district level administrator. There are times, especially if students if they're not within the same school or they're not within the same district, it sometimes is very hard actually to enforce a penalty or a punishment upon a student from, let's say, from Tonawanda, who actually has targeted a student from Webster, or actually Tonawanda is not in Monroe County, so this law would not apply to them. So let's just say a student from Hilton has bullied a student from Webster. Many times, if it's outside of the purview of the actual district, it would be very hard for that district to impose a penalty. The other piece would be if we're talking about harassment, and if it was straight bullying, again, if it was verbal or physical, that in itself, even if it was off school grounds, it may come to the point where a student is disciplined. I truly, Vin, I can't think of a time right now that we've actually, if something had happened, if two boys get in a fight over a football game and it's in their backyard, we don't impose a penalty on them when they return to school. And right now we have, because cyberbullying, really, there's no law in the books. So, many times the parents can very well come back and say, there's really nothing wrong that he's done. There's no law in the books. There's no policy that you guys have that, and your penalty is arbitrary and capricious. So I think part of the gap was, okay, you know what? Can we put something on the books that has some teeth that allows us to at least refer this to the law enforcement so that we can work together as a team to try to curb the behavior?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, if I may continue. Age is an important issue when talking about this. It's my understanding from reading the referral, the intent is to focus on anyone that would perpetrate cyberbullying on a minor. And I note that you, in this referral, used the age of 18, which I, certainly think is an acceptable definition for what a minor and adult is. However, I also note that we have a lot of colleges in Monroe County and that this is a problem as pervasive, if not perhaps potentially more, in college than it is in middle school. So through you, Madam Chair, to the makers, why did you not include older children, if we can call them that, who might be over 18 and still in an educational setting, maybe where this is more pervasive? I know there have certainly been some horrible incidents with college-age students who've fallen victim to cyberbullying with some tragic results.
Through the chair, that's a great question, and it's something that we definitely thought about. And the idea was, you know what, if we start off focusing on minors, on really students that are, high school and below, and when this law has the positive effect that we expect it will have, there will be nothing to prevent us, a year from now or 2 years from now when we go to review this and to perhaps review the data to say, you know what, let's begin to adjust the language or make edits to the language so that we're now looking at cyberbullying beyond minors as well. As I was talking with a friend just before we came into this committee meeting, there was part of me that said, all right, all the ills of society, and this is what we talked about just before we came in, do we attempt to solve all the ills of society with one particular piece of legislation? And in this case, it was, you know what, Legislator Barker and I really wanted to focus on that segment of the population that we know very well and that we've had experience with. The hope is, you know what, in 2014, if we need to expand, then we'll expand the language.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, if I may continue, I welcome that. I think that if we're going to enact a law that we think will prevent cyberbullying, it would probably be beneficial to victims of any age, and we should consider that perhaps even before then. And so I just wanted to ask that question. And along those same lines, when we talk about age, when it comes to the perpetrators or the potential bullies, so to speak, this has, I think, different ways of being applied depending on their age, from what I understand. And I guess I'd like to ask through you, Madam Chair, to perhaps the law department, perhaps the makers, if in the case where we think this is happening the most, a middle school scenario, you're going to have two minors involved who are far under 18, in fact under 16, which I believe is also an important cutoff age when it comes to who does prosecution and where those cases could potentially be heard. And so I'd like to ask again to whomever is the most appropriate, through you, Madam Chair, if someone could describe to me the differences about how a law like this would be applied or prosecuted depending on the age of the perpetrator.
Through the chair, Brett Granville, County Law Department. I think what you need to look at is under the subdivision C, where we became very specific in what we are targeting. Working with legislators Gamina and Legislator Barker and the administration, we were looking at solving or trying to educate and deter a specific habit, a specific problem. And what we did was, when you looked through the actual local law, we were very specific in what we are determining to be cyberbullying under the subdivision C under definitions. And I think that's the target. Where enforcement comes, I can speak from experience after spending 16 years in the district attorney's office. Enforcement will be determined through law enforcement. They can choose how to prosecute, how to make arrests, and what courts are appropriate and available to the cyber bullies, if you will. And this law doesn't close any of those avenues for that purpose.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, if I may follow up. So if in this a specific situation we have two 14-year-olds in middle school, one's accused of bullying another, there are charges that are decided to be brought either by the family or through law enforcement. In that case, isn't there a juvenile prosecutor who would handle that? And it wouldn't necessarily be the district attorney, but it would be someone within the county law department. Is that correct? And if so, they would then use this law were to go into effect as the guide for that prosecution?
Through the chair, that is the intent, that anyone that would fall in the family court age would be prosecuted in family court by a juvenile prosecutor, which is, there are 3 members of the county law department that handle that responsibility. I did that work for a year also.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, is there any expectation that something like this would, in terms of financial questions, increase the burden of that staff, given the increased prevalence of this type of activity? Through you, Madam Chair.
Well, I think you need to look at the purposes behind it, and also there is going to be a public session that should a prosecutor office, should a police department want to come forward and express those concerns, they have that opportunity. I don't think that this is the accurate spot to the accurate legislative body to go through and actually talk about the costs associated with preventing this activity.
Okay. Not sure if I agree. I guess my question is simply if every middle school kid in or let's say 1 in 5, to use your numbers, are victims of cyberbullying of some sort, and every family knew that Monroe County now had a law that would allow them to take some kind of action against that bully, your office could be inundated with calls from people of the county asking for justice. And that's, I think, a legitimate concern, something we should certainly consider. But I'll move on. I mean, that's not really the point of my questioning. I just think I don't think that's going to happen. Honestly, I think that would be a good thing if it worked so well that we had families recognizing that there was a problem and trying to seek the authorities. But I would like to ask, Madam Chair, through you, probably to the makers, or perhaps to the law department again. It sounds like from the conversation I heard, from the explanation of the bill and from Mr. Granville, that the law department was consulted in the crafting and creation process of this proposal. Through you, Madam Chair, were there any other law enforcement entities that were asked for an opinion or guidance on crafting something like this that had criminal implications?
I think Legislator Gamina, through the chair, answered that question. Law Department vetted its resources and went through former district attorneys, former defense counsels, and former public defenders. And so we took a full flavor review of this local law.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, to the makers.
Mr. Esposito, can I, Mr. Gamuse. Yeah.
As a small aside, there was, I did ask 2 Webster, town of Webster police officers, as well as the town attorney, to just, not so much vet this, but certainly, what would this look like in terms of enforcement, and would it be something that would overwhelm the town of Webster police force, and what their thoughts were. but it wasn't a formal vetting, certainly not to the extent that Mr. Granville did.
Thank you.
At this time, can I give other opportunities to other, I'm not going to cut off debate, because you know I wouldn't do that, but
That's fine.
Mr. Howland had a question as
Sure.
well.
Just a couple of thoughts through you, to Madam Chairman, to Legislator Esposito. The experience I've had in situations like this is I'm not really overwhelmed by or concerned about the legal process being overwhelmed. Because I think if you had 2 or 3 prosecutions in the newspaper, you'd see a lot of it stop, so you wouldn't see the complaints coming into the police department. And the other point I wanted to make is, once again from personal experience, the school administrator is not always, doesn't always have it at the top of his agenda to take care of a problem like this. Very often it's more of a, how quickly can I get rid of this type of feeling? And what I like about this referral, if it becomes a law, is that it allows an avenue for the parents of a victim of cyberbullying and if they're not happy with the actions taken by the school administrator, they've got another avenue to take. They can take it to the police department.
Ms. Kaling? Okay. Did you want to answer that, Mr. Gamia? Did you have any? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Esposito?
I appreciate your points. The second one, I hope that no school administrator would try to dismiss an issue like this because it can have serious consequences. But your first point actually leads me to another question for the law department. Because I agree, a few cases of like this, where students were found guilty maybe of cyberbullying another student could have a profound effect on the deterrent factor that I asked about in my first question. But it's my understanding, and I'd like a clarification through you, Madam Chair, to the law department, that if the perpetrator is under 16 years old, which is probably going to be the case more often than not, that those sorts of determinations in family court would not or could not be public and could not be used as an example of why this works and why it shouldn't happen again. Is that correct?
Through the chair, family court proceedings are closed.
Right. And so that's something that I think, well, it is an opportunity to say, see, middle school kids, if you do this, you're going to get in trouble. And some friends may talk and it may get out around town, which is likely to happen, but it's not going to be in the newspaper, is my point.
Twitter and Facebook, if somebody gets punished in a school, by the end of the day,
Okay. Fair enough.
everyone will know.
I just,
All right, why don't we make sure we go through the chair? That would be great. Thank you, Mr.
So-
Holland. I appreciate
So
it.
thank you. That was one of my questions, though. I just want to make sure that was true, because that is a factor. Through you, Madam Chair, one of the main points we need to get to, and I don't want to drag this out too long, because I know there are lots to do, but is the issue that you raise quite prominently in your referral about the fact that the state doesn't do this already. And that is something that I'd like to explore, because there are several ways in which, in my conversations in the past few days since this was proposed, where I found that that's not necessarily true. And the very first one is that the state has, within penal law, a punishment called aggravated harassment of the second degree, which has almost the exact same penalties as yours and uses almost some of the exact same language. And prosecutors I've talked to and other people say that if they were inclined to pursue a prosecution of a cyberbullying instance, that they would be able to use that section of law without having any limitation. And so I'd like to ask, through you, Madam Chair, to the sponsors, if that was considered, and why, or perhaps the law department, who can give the most effective response, why that section of New York State law doesn't already cover what it is we're trying to do here today, which is to prevent harassment in any form.
And through the chair, we did review the penal law section regarding aggravated harassment in the second degree, and aggravated harassment in the second degree is a different law, and it covers different area of law that the cyberbullying, this local law specifically goes beyond. And there was a reason that we looked at the penal law for that reason. We also looked at other provisions of the penal law, harassment, disorderly conduct, and we wanted to make sure for two things. We wanted to make sure there was no state preemption, which there is not, and also we wanted to give a different avenue other than the aggravated harassment, which is not a way to prosecute this type of a crime.
Okay, through you, Madam Chair, if I may ask for clarification, I mean, Section B of that defines a crime of aggravated harassment in the second degree when a person, with the intent to harass, annoy, threaten, or alarm another person, causes a communication to be initiated by mechanical or electronical means or otherwise with a person in a manner likely to cause annoyance or alarm. I guess I don't understand, not being a lawyer, I'd like more clarification, why that doesn't cover cyberbullying. Through you, Madam
And
Chair.
when you compare it specifically, through the chair, excuse me, when you compare it specifically to the local law definitions under cyberbullying, the differences are very specific in what we wrote in the local law to cover images, to cover other uses of the phone, simple than a phone call, which is what the aggravated harassment statute was intended to stop or intended to criminalize.
All right, it's my, I don't know how a text message is an electronic means, or a video or a picture or anything that would fall underneath that. And, not being a lawyer and not necessarily being concerned that if it were to be determined that this section of state law superseded or preempted our eventual law, I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world that we have something that might be considered redundant. My concern is, however, that it might be so specific that it could create new offenses that could be problematic, because it's my understanding, and again, I really don't know this as well as I'd like to, not being a lawyer, but there is state court of appeals case law that required the aggravated harassment in the second degree definition to be rolled back, to be more narrowed, because it included things originally that were unconstitutional. And so that's where I think we get close to going when we start naming all the things we've named. While the intent is obviously clear, is to make it more obvious as to the type of behavior we're discouraging, I want to, make sure we're not going down a road of unconstitutionality. And I get that there are other counties that have done it and haven't kind of that problem, and by no means am I a constitutional expert, but I wanted to mention that today. The other new thing, there's a couple new things coming from the state. Yeah.
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Thank you.
To your point, one of the things that 2 years ago when we wrote when we banned texting while driving, or the texting while driving referral in the law, at that point there was a distracted driving law on the books, and one of our state assemblymen, Assemblyman Gant, had said, he was on the record saying, you know what, there's no reason for this texting while driving law because we already have a law. It's distracted driving. And there comes a point where you say, to be more specific, to actually to codify certain behaviors, whether it's texting or receiving or sending electronic messages, while driving, you know what? You're right. It is distracted driving, but so is looking down for a French fry or looking down for to change the radio station. So I guess I understand your point, but I also think that the fact that we have 3 counties with 2 years of experience with each one, and it hasn't been challenged, and the fact that it's been vetted by the legal department as well, I do think that constitutionally it will be upheld, and I think the specifics of the law will also help as well. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
I get that, and I voted for the texting while driving ban, understanding that I think there was a benefit to raising the awareness, and I'm inclined to do so the same thing with this. But there are also 2 other things happening in New York State that I think don't necessarily say we shouldn't have a law like this in Monroe County, but certainly bolstered the effort to deal with cyberbullying that your referral implies it is not doing, and that is in July there's going to be a brand new Dignity for All Students Act, which is going to basically require every school district in the state to implement a code of conduct that includes cyberbullying and to have policies set forth, if they don't already, to ensure students are being educated about that, which I think is by far the most effective way we're ever going to address this problem. And the second one, which is also very interesting and I think might have an impact on how this plays out in family court, is a brand new program in the state budget, which is an education diversion program. And if in any case in family court where someone, a minor, is in that in that court, the judge has the option to divert them to a program specifically if they've shown signs of cyberbullying, sexting, email abuse, whatever those cases might be. And again, that's another avenue that I think might be more effective than a prosecution of a fine or any other type of punishment in terms of giving judges discretion within family court to do those types of things. And that also might be something we want to consider if we're inclined to amend this particular bill, and perhaps to bolster that opportunity in Monroe County Family Court to give judges either more funding or more opportunity to do that type of thing and that type of behavior, which is preventative in nature and not punishment or punitive in nature, that I think will have a greater effect in addressing the root cause of cyberbullying, which is insensitivity towards other people and all of the things that kids are prone to do. So I guess I will yield the floor at this time, Madam Chair. I know there's a lot to this, and I may be making more out of it when, at the end of the day, I do believe it's a positive to highlight the issue of cyberbullying and add something in our county that would make people give greater pause to doing it and hopefully increase public awareness, because I think that's really what this is about, is increasing public awareness of a very dangerous activity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Cayley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I let my colleague go first, and when he's on a roll, he's on a roll. That's okay. Brought out a lot of good points. But before I ask any questions, if I would like to, add a positive feeling towards this referral. I do have questions about it, but I do think that cyberbullying is bullying. It's bullying. It just gets a new way to get across, and it's anonymous at many times. But with the advent of the electronic age, it's just easier now to be a bully and to take things to the extreme. And so I really do appreciate the effort that's going into this in trying to craft it so that it has the best impact, even if it does ultimately turn out to be an incremental impact and be refined. But that said, I guess through the chair to the legal experts, if a case of cyberbullying came in front of the courts or the police department or what have you today that showed the same type of callous disregard for someone's feelings, how would it be proceeded? What would happen? Could it be brought to court?
Through the chair, again, speaking through experience, the police departments weigh in, determine whether or not arrest is appropriate and a referral is appropriate, and then there will be a review by a district attorney's office. And so before it even gets to the courts, there's already going to be a set review to determine how it should proceed from the police standpoint and also from a prosecutor standpoint before it gets to a judge, and then a judge will also then have a chance to determine how the prosecution, if you will, or how the punishment should be vetted out.
Thank you. But I guess more pointedly, could it be brought to the police at this point without the terms that are set forth in this referral? Are there not any mechanisms within or tools within our legal system to bring a case of cyberbullying full circle? Through the chair.
Through the chair, we've done research into that, and there has not. And the closest, Legislator Esposito is correct, the closest that there is the aggravated harassment law, but it does not deal with a repeated course of conduct. It does not deal with bullying, or it does not deal with this new computer age and this new technology. And that is why, again, reviewing the law that has been put forth here, the local law, it's very specific in its purpose for that reason.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost my questions. Through the chair, going a little bit farther into this, has there been, and I guess I'll take this back to the makers, if I may. Have there been conversations about the result of bullying by, I would tend to put a definition of bullying by proxy, which I think we all, if I explain it, you'll understand what I mean. I sent an email saying that I didn't like so-and-so to somebody else, and somebody else sent that to so-and-so, and I sent another email to that somebody else saying, and this person does this, and so that side person kept sending. That is, it has the same effect, but it is through a different entity than the person that actually said it. Have you thought about that particular behavior and how that might not be addressed in this or would be addressed? And if it is, could you explain that?
Through the chair, I think I understand your scenario, and I think that the language within the referral talks about that repetitive offense with the intent to harass, annoy, threaten, and I think I understand your point of, okay, what's repetitive, and how do you make sure that the repetitive behavior is brought back or leads back to the same person, to whatever bully started it, is I think your point. And to your point, Legislator Cayley, that would be something that, in a way, I guess I would turn over to the law enforcement. And during their investigation, if they determine that, if, let's say you're sending notes about me, and you're sending them to Legislator Esposito, and Legislator Esposito is then sending them, he's broadcasting them through his Facebook page. So he's getting the information from you, you're starting it, but he's the one that's actually spreading it. How would law enforcement view that? Would both of you be guilty of cyberbullying, or would it just be Legislator Esposito? And my cards are on Legislator Esposito and not on you. But I understand that, and I unfortunately I don't have a great answer for you, because I think that would be the role of law enforcement and also of the DA's office. Because I think the language is there. If there's a repetitive offense or repetitive targeting to harass, annoy, or threaten, can it be whoever the investigation leads to, that's the person that will be charged. But that's not my purview. I don't enforce it. We just make it and
Thank you,
vote on
and
it.
through the chair, I appreciate that.
Okay.
But if anything, I'm always picking up on the little things that can end up being problematic. And I think when we're dealing with, I worked at the Villa, through the chair, I worked at the Villa. I know how things spread, and I had teenagers. And a lot of times bullying doesn't necessarily spread from the source. It does spread from an outsource. And that is the one part that, when we say that we'll leave it up to the legal system to figure out who's actually to blame or who's at the center of it, that I have a little bit of a problem with, the same way that I would have a bit of a problem with a school or a legal system that says that we don't have the wherewithal to prosecute at this point based on the laws that we have. I do have a problem with that. But
Anything further, Ms. Cayley?
no, not at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McCann, did you have? Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Mr. Esposito, I'm gonna ask that I have a moment to talk about this as well, because I do have teenagers myself. I am probably one of few. I get laughed at all the time. I don't allow my children to text. I think it's inappropriate. I think it leads to lack of being able to communicate. And so my children certainly get, they don't like it, but so be it. And I just wanted to mention the fact that I did go to the presentation by Dr. McQuaid, and his message was just so clear. And so, it was just, with such passion, he talks about cyberbullying. And I just wanted to say the fact that, he's been working at this for so many years and done so much research in this area that certainly it would be, it would be something that I would support highly. So I thank Mr. Gamina for bringing this forward, as well as Mr. Barker as well. I have one question to the maker. At one point, we did talk about teen courts being utilized instead of this going to family court. What may address the issue with regards to the cost associated with this. Can you speak to that as well?
To you, Madam Chair, we did not, I was not involved in those discussions regarding teen court.
Okay.
And just how feasible that would be within our county. Perhaps Mr. Granville could speak to that, but I cannot.
Through the chair, again, I think what you're addressing is the legal process, and this is just the vehicle to get an individual into court. And how a person, a bully, if you will, is vetted through the court system and goes through the court system will be determined through many aspects of the legal system. This doesn't attempt to address that. This is just simply a vehicle to bring that person to the court in order that the court determine, with input, proper prosecution, proper punishment, which could include teen court.
Okay, well, my understanding through experience is that it is up to the discretion of the sheriff's office or the prosecutor or the agency that will bring the charge forward. They can utilize, whether it be any kind of mediation or just taking the child, the attention to the parents, as well as my understanding through the information that was presented the night Dr. McQuaid came in, is that teen court would also be a possibility that the sheriff's office would have at their discretion. So I was just trying to answer the fact that, we're talking about this could cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars or whatever to bring this to court, but that might be one deterrent that might save the taxpayers money. Mr. Esposito, do you have a further question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd certainly appreciative of the conversation tonight and the answers from the law department. However, I would like to make a request. Not having had much time to review this, we're in a short cycle, and to understand all of the legal implications, I don't think we need to hold up the vote tonight to move this through this committee to have a debate at full legislature. But I would like to ask through you, Madam Chair, to the law department, if they could provide some kind of written opinion about why this isn't preempted by state law and why the terms that were decided to be used and put into this we don't believe will be run afoul of any constitutional issues or creating any new offenses in law that could be problematic. I think that would be helpful. Like I said, I understand the intent of the maker to just create a law that's stronger than what might be in state law, but there are legal concerns and that have been raised to me by people that know a lot more about this, and I think we'd all benefit before the full legislature to have an opinion from the law department on those questions. And so I guess I'd like to respectfully make that request.
Would that be something we could fulfill, Mr. Helfer?
Madam Chair, yes, we'd be happy to provide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further, or hearing no further discussion, we'll vote on the matter. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Great, item passes. Next referral, referral 12-141, the Monroe County Sensible Opportunity for Legislative Equality, SOUL Act.
Moved by Ms. Kaylee, seconded by Mr. Esposito. Is there a discussion on the matter? I will recognize Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address the Agenda Charter Committee again to discuss the sole referral introduced very recently. And I recognize this is my second visit in a row to Agenda Charter, and I just want to reinforce I appreciate your attention and consideration. Sometimes ideas arise that simply make sense and are the right things to do. And sometimes these ideas are referred to as bipartisan, but I prefer to say nonpartisan, at least in this case. And as President Adair recently stated in the DNC, there is sometimes a lack of trust present on both sides of the aisle, and I think he's right. And this referral is an attempt to help mitigate some of that distrust and replace it perhaps with respect and maybe even a smattering of goodwill. And like everyone else in this room today, I'm no Pollyanna who believes we would always agree on every matter if only X, Y, or Z could happen. I recognize that there are limits to how much we might be able to cooperate or work together on. But just because there's some undefined limit, that does not mean we should wash our hands of each other and pretend that nothing proposed by colleagues across the aisle has ever had merit, and that everything proposed by our colleagues across the aisle must always be opposed no matter what, just because someone might benefit 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now. Because when we do that, such thinking condemns us to a gridlock and public disgust, and in fact weakens the very institutions we're pledged to serve, support, and defend. And I'm not just talking about this legislative body. I'm talking about our state and national constitutions as well. The things that define who we are and who we want to be, they're harmed and they're lessened when we refuse to at least sometimes reach out to each other. And I look across the aisle and I see good faces over there. I really do. When I first came to this body nearly a year ago, in fact, a year and a half ago now, I was taken aside more than once by colleagues from the other side of the aisle, my Republican colleagues, and some of them in positions of leadership, and they earnestly shared their opinion that we agreed 95% of the time. But there were some areas where we had different positions and ideas and even philosophies. And this was said to me to reassure that we could in fact work together and that it was possible for us to move forward in the interest of the county. I believe they were correct then, and in fact are correct now. And this referral again is an opportunity to act on this shared truth, to be that legislative body we wish to be. Now, as you know, the sole referral has its genesis with Assemblyman Johns and with the support of Assemblyman Rylick of Greece and Assemblyman Hanna of Mendon. And they made this proposal to the State Assembly that during each cycle, each legislator would be guaranteed that at least one referral would be heard and considered by the body as a whole. And this whole legislation was born out of frustration, a frustration that I believe everyone in this room is aware of, and I think that some of us have experienced more than others, but we're aware of it at least, that this frustration exists. And this speaks to our situation in this, this legislature in this county. And we actually find ourselves in a position where we as county legislators from both parties can put our money where our mouths are and then show the State Assembly how it could be done. My referral is a living referral. And while not a member of this committee, as the author, I assure you that fine-tuning by ways of amendments or considerations, what if this occurs or what if that occurs, are not just desirable, it's heartily welcome. I would urge you to do that. What's not terribly welcome is that dreary silence we sometimes get of non-engagement, of not discussing and sharing the pros or cons of an engagement, of a referral. It's particularly the cons. I love to hear those things. I'm sure everyone would like to hear those things as well. But when we hear nothing, that's a tragedy. And in fact, the last topic of conversation, there's a great discussion on that. I think a lot of progress was made, and there's going to be a fine law that comes out of that, but only because of discussion. Clearly, at least I hope it's clear, that this referral is not one of left versus right, of liberal, progressive, moderate, or conservative ideologies. It's not even one of wielding political power, because, in fact, this referral is pretty limited in scope. Rather, it's a referral that recognizes that ideas have value and worth, especially in our democracy's legislative bodies, and that both Republicans and Democrats here today will need, or perhaps need now, this at some point or another. And finally, while recognizing I'm not a member of this committee, and that I cannot vote, table, or withdraw referrals once they're put in, I would request, however, particularly of my Republican colleagues, that if you determine you cannot support this referral as written, then please table this referral for future consideration, and perhaps the introduction of amending language that members of this committee of either party might see fit to make. I request that this done simply in place, this to be done, simply to replace the possibility of just voting nay, because it's an opportunity to show the naysayers and pessimists that we see in the press all the time that we can indeed listen to each other, we can indeed work together. And in fact, we can protect the prerogatives of the majority while allowing minority voices to be heard and considered. And we might even find some opportunities for bipartisan referrals. And in fact, to that end, I'd be pleased if this or some amended version of this referral were to have Chairman Colley voice, or even Anthony Donnelly or any other colleague as a co-sponsor. I urge your vocal consideration of this matter before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Howland.
Madam Chairman, our country was founded on the principles of a participatory form of government where everyone can fairly have a voice. Legislator Broth used that exact language in his referral, which is the basic foundation of our process of government. This process also applies to our Monroe County Legislature in the way a local law or referral is proposed, vetted, and voted upon. The committee process offers opportunity for everyone's input to be heard, from both legislators and the public. In this respect, committees often act as workshops. The con of this proposal is that the proposal would circumvent the very process our county government is founded upon, the process that allows our legislature to perform our task in an orderly and timely fashion.
Thank you. Anything further? Mr. Esposito.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the sponsor for putting this forward and coming here and talking to us today. Mr. Holland's absolutely right, but I think we all know how things really work here. This is a very simple issue. It's flat out wrong that of 29 Democratic proposals from minority members in the last 2 years, only one of them has made it to a vote. It's even worse that nearly half of those, 14 of the 29, were denied that actual process that Mr. Howland just talked about. They weren't even allowed to be discussed at committee. It's wrong that in 5 years or over 4 years of being here, despite significant efforts, I've never had a bill even voted on in the full legislature of this body. We're elected to take votes. We're elected to represent people. It's wrong that the democratic process that Mr. Howland described is set up to prevent that from happening, and it's wrong that my constituents and any minority member of this body would have constituents that don't have a full voice. This referral won't justify or rectify all of that, but it'll simply allow each elected member of this body to bring one proposal every cycle. That's barely more than one a month, with a total of 29 potential referrals that we'd have to vote on as we're elected to do. It's not going to overburden anybody. It's not going to cause us to have to quit our day jobs. It just helps rectify a system that's been stacked up inappropriately. Therefore, I'll be strongly supporting this referral.
Thank you, Mr. Esposito. Mr. Howland?
Legislator Esposito is right that in the last term, the minority party introduced a total of 29 referrals, and 15 were referred to this committee or two committees. Any referrals that were rejected, the 14 he was talking about, were done so because they failed to meet the requirements outlined in the charter. So we must follow our own charter if we're going to be a body of law. If a member of the minority party truly feels they do have a good idea, rather than having this change to our charter, I think it's just as easy to approach the as Legislator Broth said, good people on both sides. If I have an idea and I want your support, I'm going to bring it to you. I think if you bring it to me or someone else, you're going to find that it's going to be a much smoother operation getting something considered rather than just bringing it in on one side the first time and having sometimes just being very surprised. I know there's been a number of things that have been brought before the legislature. The first time I heard about it was the night of the meeting. So if you have an idea that you think is going to work or is going to help our community, let's discuss it a little bit beforehand, even before it's brought before the committee, and then perhaps it would have a much better chance of being passed.
Ms. Cayley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate my colleague, Mr. Howland's comments, but exactly what he was supposing shouldn't happen happened this evening. Two of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle brought forth good legislation to this committee, and without necessarily reaching out to the other side of the aisle for it to happen. So, that said, I never thought that I'd really consider myself in the ranks of the GOP in Albany and how they feel when they can't bring their legislation forward. But it is something that needs to be considered. And certainly, we had a conversation last month where we were talking about something that I brought forward and did come to committee, and I was asked to sit on your side of the aisle. I would like you to come on over here and sit on this side of the aisle for a while, Mr. Howland, and see, through the chair, thank you, what it feels like. So, I do support this referral, and I would like to see a positive vote on this evening, and I would also like to see it go to other committee members so they perhaps could offer amendments or adjustments or their support of it in a co-sponsorship. And unless we take it through this point, there will be no option there.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to point out probably some historical perspective on this. And when I was in the legislature, back in the late 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, I did work cooperatively and collaboratively on both sides of the aisle, and actually brought legislation forth in a bipartisan manner. And one of probably the most renowned ones was with regards to the smoking law in Monroe County, where Mr. Benet and myself worked on that legislation together. And one thing I will say is that I did receive this piece of legislation the night of the legislature, and I did reach across the aisle to Mr. Broth and had a conversation with him. And I said, I think that we could work on something to this together, and I thought we had a plan, but I guess that plan fell through. So that's unfortunate that didn't work. I was under the impression that Mr. Broth was willing to work on this together. So at this point, we can take a vote on this. Do you have another?
Yes, Madam Chair, at this point I would move to table this. And I would say that going back to your conversation, that Mr. Broth has relayed to us that there have been positive comments from the other side of the aisle, and this would give us the opportunity to take this back and work on both sides to make it a more amenable, not say that word, Josh, sorry. Amenable. Thank you.
Second, Madam Chair.
We'll vote on the matter to table. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Passes. Fails. I apologize. I shouldn't do the math.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your vote.
No.
I didn't hear your vote. It was no?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Main motion?
On the main motion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. No. Okay.
3-2 fails, or 2-3 fails.
Okay, thank you. Next order of business?
That was it.
Sorry.
We're on to unfinished business.
Oh, I apologize.
It's all right.
I thought we had one more. Okay. Unfinished business at that time? I'll recognize Mr. Adair.
Madam Chair, at this time I'd like to make a motion to lift referral 12-0052, 2012 annual work program for the Monroe County Legislature.
Second by Mr. Howland. Any discussion on the matter? Mr. Adair, would you like to?
Get a vote on a lift.
Okay.
Before we can talk.
Did we vote
Okay.
on a lift?
First motion is to lift from the table.
Right.
We got a vote to lift.
So, all in favor? Opposed?
Okay, it's lifted.
Okay. The matter is now lifted, we may discuss. Mr. Adair, apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd like to, first off, what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank this committee, both sides, for the work that they put into the work program. I submitted this, as I'm required to do as president, at every cycle. This year, I made sure that it went in January, and I made I gave the outline of what I wanted to do, and the referral was in. But I asked that we chair it so that it would give time for this committee and others to give us some strong input into the work program and making it something that's going to be a working document for us in the legislature. I will tell you that from myself, I'm really happy with the outcome of where we are with this. I think we've added 4 main lines to this. I think we added one on infrastructure. I think we did public safety, human services, and Monroe County visibility. So at this time, what I would like to do is I would like to offer an amendment to the referral. And with a second, I will have that passed out and let everybody take a look at it.
Yeah, Mr. McCann, seconded by Mr. McCann. I apologize. Do we have to amend that?
Ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Adair?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Agenda Charter Committee. As I said in my opening statement, and why I offered this amendment was because of the fact that we've had, I think it's now been 3 months to work on this. And again, I think there's some really good language in this. I think there's some really good goals as far as what we want to accomplish in here. Just going down through, taking a look at it, infrastructure was added to it. As I said before, public safety, human services, we put in a dialogue about that. And we also captured the Monroe County visibility, which was to give, to provide community educational update. We also put in there, in the language, to promote diversity within local government. I think all in all, again, thank you to everybody that gave me their input on it. And if there's any questions at this time, I'll entertain them.
Mr. Esposito?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to commend the President. This is something that's been ongoing not only for a few months, but for several years. We've discussed the lack of a work plan. This is, in fact, I think the first time it'll be adopted since I've been elected to the legislature. And I'd really like to commend him. Not only do I think we have a good plan that outlines the objectives that this legislature should be focused on going forward, but I think this is really how the process in this body should work going forward. We just had a lot of discussion about when things are introduced, how they're introduced. In this case, something was introduced. There was a desire to improve it. This maker was willing to table it so that those discussions could happen, and it's now been brought back in amended form and substantially amended at the request of other legislators, and something that we could all agree on. I hope that that continues to be a model for what we do here, and I'd like to obviously indicate my support of voting for this work plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esposito. Ms. Cayley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the maker, I also wholeheartedly support this. And I was very, I was almost going to say but I didn't say but, because.
What you just did.
But I didn't. I did say but to me, not to you, but. In reading it, it is, I think, a very comprehensive document. And I would like to say that in the future that we can just do a little bit more of a discussion, because even reading this now, we all felt it was a good piece. But there might be something that could be approved on in the future, and that would just be a conversation going forward before the end of the year. And other than that, it's no but. I like it.
Thank you.
Is that a new slogan?
Through the chair. I will, just to go back to in January when I introduced this, I just want to say that I presented it to this committee as a working document. Do not believe that. I think one of the things that I said was that I didn't want to make this something we just shelve, that we can look at this, we can refresh it if it needs to be refreshed. We can make it so that it's a little bit, where are we, kind of a benchmark type things on where we are with ourselves. So it is, to your point, Legislator Keeley, yes, this is not something that I want to just say, okay, we're done tonight with it. So, okay, thank you.
If I might, just to the President of Adair, not to, but I just wanted to belabor this point, but I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to work on this so diligently. This is probably the best working document I've seen in my years of the legislature. So I want to commend you for that and for your willingness to give all members of the body input on this. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but I am very, that's very nice of you to say. I'm very humbled by it, but I will tell you what, it was everybody that was on this committee, plus other people outside of this committee that helped me with it. So to them, too, should go the kudos of working together.
Thank you. We'll vote on the matter?
We have to vote on the amendment first.
Oh, we got to vote on the amendment. I apologize. We'll vote on the amendment. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Passes. Now on the main motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Okay,
Passes. Is there any other unfinished business? Seeing none, we'll stand adjourned. The next meeting of the agenda charter will be May 21st. Thank you.